Hello, Manny Beal here. This is part 13 of my deconstruction of UPB, and I'm attempting here in this and possibly the next part is adding a comment to two videos Stefan Molyneux made regarding universally preferable behavior called respectively Ethics Reloaded and I think Ethics Redux, or UPB Redux, I'm not sure. But this one is called Ethics Reloaded, and then I'll take the other one at another time. I think this was the first additional video, and then the other one I mentioned was the next. So let's head into it. I have watched them some years back, so I have a faint idea what they were about. But I'm just taking this, on the fly, so to say, right? I'm winging it. So let's see how it goes. All right.
I hope that you're doing very well. This is a short presentation on my rational theory of secular ethics, UPB Redux Ethics Summarized. I hope that you will enjoy it, and I hope that it will give you a little taste of the excitement of secular ethical definitions so that you will storm off and pick up your free copy of my audiobook or PDF, or if you don't mind shelling out a few shekels, the print version of the book. So you can grab the work at freedomainradio.com/free.
I might mention that this and the other video I mentioned are not available on. They're not available on freedomain, the freedomain website. There are two pages, one for either of the videos, and they have sort of been wiped, and they're no longer available. And they can be found on this website called Alt Censored, and I believe that they might also be available on library.tv and maybe Odyssey, these blockchain-based video websites. So it can be a little hard to find them, but let's see if it isn't possible to see them decently here from these websites. So let's go.
The website URL is just below. Oh, and if you're having trouble seeing this presentation, there are high definition versions. I have one just off to the right of what you were looking at in the description. You can click on that to get a more high definition version of this presentation. It's tricky at first, but it gets very easy as you get the hang of it. And it's good that it's tricky, because if we as a species have not figured out how to have ethics without gods, governments, biology, culture, tradition, bullying, and whatnot, then it would be kind of bad if it weren't tricky to begin with. So let's go over some of the basic definitions. Again, I'm not going to cover all the topics because it's a big topic, but I wanted to go over the framework so that you can at least begin to see the value of what it is that this is in terms of a leap forward in the definitions of ethics. So, since material reality, that exciting place that I am streaming to you from, is objective and behaves in a rational and predictable manner, I mean this box, not the human being in it necessarily.
Well, this is one of those things I am going in the series about the books, the 12-part series I presented recently on my website here, that since material reality is objective and behaves in a rational or predictable manner, that isn't even a sentence, right? Since what, right? Sort of dependent on something. So now, since this is the case, then later may come. Okay, maybe let's see how it turns out. Material reality is objective. No, nothing is objective by definition. I'm beating this horse like it's completely flat at this point, and I repeat it time and time again in the deconstruction video series. And you may want to have a look in all those places where I need to clarify this. But material reality, when he's talking by material reality, he is talking about that which you with that experience, that part of your experience, which you consider being something outside your mind, so to say, right? When you experience a cow, you don't think that the cow is in your head, so to say. You experience it or think of it as being outside your head, right? But that experience you have of all the experience you have must be in your mind. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to, experience it for good reasons, right? It's like saying, I have a child, it is outside, but I'm experiencing it in my house. That can't be, it's either it's outside or it's inside the house, right? So if your child is outside, you can't experience it inside your house. At most, you could have a photograph or a memory or something like that. If you had a photograph of your child inside, then you can say, okay, this child of which I have a photograph inside represents something that is outside. Now, the problem with this analogy is that that which is outside has never been experienced by anyone, right? At least not by me, so to say, right? But I extend that to everyone. Because if it's outside your mind, you can't experience it, right? Because it's outside your mind. If you can experience it, it can't be, that thing you experience can't be outside your mind because you are exactly experiencing it. And so it must be inside your mind, right? So how do you, this sort of paradox, how do you solve that? Well, the only way to solve that is to say that what you experience at most is a representation of something that is outside your mind, which you do not experience, right? If you experience a cow, that which you experience is not the cow itself, it's a reflection that has somehow been manifested in your mind and representing something outside your mind, which your mind has never experienced. How would that outside be able to manifest itself inside your mind? Like there's not a package of, like when you get an IKEA sofa, there's not a little manual that says this is supposed to be, put together this way. So the mind has never got a manual for how to create representations. It is just guessing over millions and millions and millions and years of evolution, I suppose. So therefore, when Stefan Molyneux said, since material reality is objective, he is actually saying that he both has access to that which is really outside his mind, and that it's objective. Now, nothing in any way that I can understand the term objective is something that an object can be, because if an individual is a subject, let's call it a subject, right? And that's why we call it subjective, because it's a subject that has that experience. And from the get-go, everything you experience is subjective because it's you, the subject, experiencing it. So what would it really entail to say that something is objective, where the only way I could construct objectivity, of an object that you experience, like that cow I mentioned before, would be that if somebody else is experiencing the same object and you can agree upon that experience, those two subjective experience can be sort of agreed upon as an objective experience. And it makes sense, etymologically, because if it's objective, then it is the object that is unchanging between two different subjects. So the common core of the objectivity is the object. While if there's only one person or there's no agreement upon an object, you have your subjective experience that you have, right? So when you say that something is true, then you mean that, then you are talking about a reference of your experience to something else. But since you do not have any other reference to anything about your experience. To make something true, to communicate it to another individual, you have to make a proposition. You have to express it verbally or in some other fashion that makes sense, right? So if you say that is a cow, somebody else can register what you mean because there's a connection between the sound cow and that concept in that other individual's mind. And when you say that cow, they know if that concept that was ignited by that sound in their mind corresponds with their experience. Now, there is a caveat to that, and that is you do not know if they're lying, right? That if you're standing on a large field and there's a cow there and there's nothing to disturb and it's in the light of day and so on, and you say that's a cow and you make the proposition, and another person standing right next to you looking the same direction, there's nothing else, and that person says that proposition is false, the proposition being that's a cow. Well, you can't check whether or not that person is experiencing cow or not, right? You can say that you made the proposition. It could be that they couldn't hear that you are mentioning cow, so they don't know what you're talking about. But if they're saying it's false, they must have some kind of relation to that proposition. So it's pretty decently obvious that they are responding to your proposition. But if they're saying it's false, well, then it must be the comparison between the concept in your proposition and the concept in their experience that doesn't match up. So they're saying it's false. That means they don't experience cow. But if you're standing in an open field and there's one cow and you're both looking at the cow, it seems inconceivable why that other person wouldn't experience that cow. There might be a reason that you haven't, they're blind or whatever. But all things considered, you can't check whether or not they're lying. You can't check that because you don't have the experience. This is what is called the problem of other minds. But if you experience things and people around you keep saying the opposite of your proposition, it might be a good time to find new friends, so to say, right? Because they may be trying to manipulate you. If that keeps popping up, either you should check yourself somehow that you're not seeing things you shouldn't see, or there's something wrong that needs to be dealt with, right? And normally people, they don't disagree about these things, right? And things work out. But there are certain areas here and there where people tend to talk about things they think exist, like, government or, society, family, things that they sort of think exist, but actually do not exist. And it's these kind of mostly collective ideas that, puts a fork in the road between a good philosopher and, bad philosophy and so on, right? So when something is predictable, matter or reality is not predictable. That it's not an aspect, it's not an attribute of that which you experience. You have a memory of things behaving in a certain way, but that doesn't mean that it necessarily must behave that way in the future. There's nothing wrong in predicting things. We all do that. I mean, I do that. I predict that this will be recorded, and I predict that there will be sound and pictures in my video, and I predict that when I eat something in a few hours, I will, feed myself and I will stay alive. All sorts of things I keep predicting all the time, and that's why we rationalize. We rationalize our sort of daily goings about, but it doesn't mean we know that. Right? It doesn't mean we know that it will be, we can predict it, but that's another thing than knowing that it will happen. Prediction is not a part of reality. Prediction is specifically something that is part of my mental abilities. And I extend that to every other individual, in more higher or lower degree. So, okay, let's go.
If you make a statement that you claim to be true, it must describe something that is objective, rational, and predictable.
No, it mustn't. No, that's incorrect. Again, a statement that is true. Well, a statement is not true, right? It's not the statement that is true. It's not, that's a cow that is true. It's the statement compared to your experience that is true. So it might not seem like there is a distinction, but there is a very important distinction. You need to have an experience to compare that statement, or more precisely, what is called a proposition. It's a statement that can be true or false. And most notably, it must refer to some object, like cow or cat or car or airplane or something like that, right? So it's not the statement that is true. And the truth doesn't describe anything. Truth is just a conclusion about the comparison between a proposition and an experience. And it must not be objective, because from the get-go, there is your subjective experience of that object. So it is subjective from the start. You could only talk about objectivity if you agree with somebody else about it. Then you have some sort of objectivity. But the objective part is not in the object, but in the agreement, right? Nothing happens to the object just because you agree with somebody else about it. It's still the same, I presume, right? It's not the proposition or your agreement that does anything to the object. So there's nothing about it that is objective, right? It's an experience you have, and you can create objectivity by agreeing with somebody else about it. Rational, I don't know why you would call an object rational. Rationality is the human mind trying to figure out what to reason about, and that which it wants to reason about when it's rational is what is valuable to reason about. So it's rational to reason about that which is valuable in a final or end result of that which you are reasoning about, right? You want to reason about how to get food tonight, or where to sleep tonight. I mean, maybe that may be settled, you have a house or whatever, right? But if you're fleeing from Nazis, right? You wouldn't sit down and have a smoke or something, right? It would be rational to keep running because it's valuable to stay alive, if you understand, right? So you're rationalizing, I'm going to run as fast as I can in that direction. You could also reason about how would it be to sit down and have a sandwich or something like that. That would be fine reasoning. There's nothing wrong with that. But it wouldn't be rational, right, to reason about that. It would be rational to keep running until you have no apparent Nazis on your heels. Predictable, nothing about what you would call reality is predictable. Predictability is based on an past experience, but past experience is not what you experience now, because what is reality is what is experienced now. And predictions are specifically pointing to the future. So it is past experience may be confirmed by the present that is then predicted into the future in a sort of an inductive fashion. So it's not reality that is predictable. It's your combination of your past memory of past happenings combined with a check in the now that is predicting the future, right? And rightfully so, he quotes science as one of them, right? So that's it.
Science, math, engineering, and so on. Those thoughts which are designed to define truth must be rational, objective, and predictable. And again, I'm not saying all of this is proven.
Designed to define truth. Well, that must be philosophy, right? So philosophy must be rational. Why? Philosophy must entail reasoning, the complete set of reasonings, not only those reasonings He might conflate the words rational and reasoning, and so be it, right? But I differentiate between reasoning and rationality. Objective? No. Why would that be necessary? You from the start, you have only subjective experience, so you are thinking about your subjective experience, and you don't need predictability to define truth. How if you're experiencing a cow, what do you need to predict to experience that cow? You don't even know if you should experience that. But what do you need to predict? You don't need to predict anything. You're experiencing a cow, so be it, right? This is complete nonsense, right? But it's the same thing he goes over again and again and again in the book.
We're just going over the framework, and then you can delve into the book if you're more interested in this absolutely gripping and absolutely essential topic. So what do I mean? Let's look at this graphically. Well, we have this shaded black bowling ball called material reality. Clearly, we have some sort of Brahmin green smiley face called a mind. And there is overlapping stuff. There is stuff which occurs in the mind which does not occur within reality. There is obviously stuff that occurs in reality which does not impact on the mind or the dark side of the moon.
How could you possibly know? How could you possibly know? You're saying, okay, there must be a dark side of the moon, but you don't know that. If you don't experience it, you don't know it. It might be there, you're guessing, right? But that's not a part of material reality, because that is what is realized. That is what is experienced. It's the light side of the moon that you experience. You don't experience the dark side of the moon. That is an inference based on, your predictions, right? But you have to go and check if you want to know. It would be ridiculous to go and check every night whether there's a dark side of the moon. Why would you? Because it's not rational, right? But these there's a tendency for human beings to create stories where it fills out the holes by inferences. Like, okay, there's a light side of the moon, I can see that. I can't see the dark side of the moon, but it must be there, right? It must be there. Even though I don't know it, I am saying that it must be there. The problem is that most philosophers take the next step and say, it is knowledge that there's a dark side of the moon. Well, if somebody is sitting somewhere in a spaceship looking at the dark side of the moon, then they experience the dark side of the moon. And then they can say, it is true, there is a dark side of the moon. But me sitting here looking up at the light side of the moon, I can't say there's a dark side of the moon because I don't experience it. And I know to most people this sounds crazy, because and there must be, and the moon and so on. Well, if you don't experience it, it's not knowledge, right? It's not a part of this, fantastic reality the guy is talking about. So, and this is a representation of what would be called a dualist mind view, in my opinion. There's material and there's mind. That there are basically two different kinds of stuff. There are materials and there is mind. And this is a fallacious representation of what is going on. What he does is that which he experiences inside his mind, he is claiming is actually outside his mind. Now, I'm not 100% certain about it, but I'm pretty confident that is what he thinks. But what you experience as material reality is a representation of something that is outside your mind, but which you do not experience, because your experience of it is inside your mind, right? So there is nothing you can refer to outside your mind. You can only refer to it inside your mind, and then categorize it at this part is only inside the mind, and this part is something that represents something that could also be outside your mind.
Moon through most of human history and so on. And then there are places where the mind and empirical reality overlap. So In there, we have truth statements, statements of truth about material reality, objective statements that people.
But a statement is not true. The statement, that's a cow, is not true. It's the comparison. I know you say the proposition is true, but you have to, dig a little deeper when we have to be very sharp on this, right? There are no statements anywhere that are true by definition. There has to be some subject comparing that statement to their experience, right? So that material reality, all of it is in your mind. You are referring to something that is also in your mind. And this kind of, overlapping areas, and that is where truth is. No, it doesn't work. Truth is not a part of your experience. Truth is a artificial conclusion of that comparison between the proposition and your experience.
Who want to make claims about material reality have to conform to this objectivity, this rationality, and so on. In the mind, we have things that don't occur in reality. There's dreams, there are various depths of self-knowledge about your history and who you are. There's the unconscious. And again, the mind is material. I'm not saying it's any kind of magical elf, but these processes that occur within the mind are not derived from external reality. When I dream about an elephant, it's going on within my mind. I'm not getting an amazing vision to some sort of Kunta Kinte planet. And there are base physical processes, how we fight infection, and so we don't.
Now, what he does is, what is subjective is something that is fluffy, that is unconscious and dreams and thoughts about your self-knowledge and sort of your own self-esteem. I would think something like that, physical process. I don't know exactly what he means, but no, it's not just that which is subjective. Everything in your experience is subjective to you. You're the subject, right? You're the only one who has your experience. The only way to find out if other people have that experience is trying to establish an objectivity by, proposing, right? And then agreeing upon it and hoping that there actually is an agreement. Let me step a little forward here. I think we have done enough of this metaphysics.
Next. Basically, we have an idea that material reality is a concept within the mind. Plato.
A concept within the mind. It's more than a concept. Concepts are what you refer to. That's the cow. But there are also the colors of the cow and the placement of the cow in relation to the space and your notion of time and so on. But the concepts are, the cow, right? And that's correct. What Kant says.
So has this same thing, that the true reality, the higher reality, what Kant called the noumenal reality, or Plato's forms, or the.
I think Kant called the noumena, not noumenal. So
Cartesian, my brain is a tank in the manipulation of a demon approach. Material reality is a concept within the mind. There's no such thing as objective empirical truth.
There's no relative subjectivism. I'm not sure. It's not relativism and subjectivism. I don't think you have got things wrong there. This is metaphysics. It's, if you say subjectivism is that all your experience is subjective, is based on your subject. Well, you are the subject, so it must be subjective, right? From the get-go, or from the starting point, there are only the subjective experience until you reach objectivity. So the claim is by those, this is called idealism in some catch-all phrase for this kind of metaphysics. There is no such thing as objective empirical truth. Why wouldn't there be? That's nonsense. Of course there is. You can't, the only difference between empirical truth in your to use your term, in your metaphysics and the idealist metaphysics is all that the idealists say is what you refer to in that empirical truth is something that is in your mind, because there possibly is something outside your mind on which it is based, but the idealists just say you can't get to the real thing. You only have your sort of your mental picture, your photograph of that which your mind has never seen, or no minds ever in history of minds have ever seen, right? It can be objective. Of course it can be objective. That's why it's so important with objectivity, because you have to agree on people on what you experience if you need to work together with them, right?
It can also be that material reality is completely disconnected from the mind. That's it.
No, I don't think that would be crazy talk, right? That material reality, but then you wouldn't call it material reality, because you wouldn't know what it is if it's disconnected from the mind. Disconnected, yes, if you say that, as I say, that you have the experience in your mind and what it's based on is outside your mind, but you do not know what it is because your experience is inside your mind. If you mean that it's disconnected, that thing that may be outside of which you cannot have access is disconnected, then if that's what you mean by disconnected, well then I agree. But it is connected via the experience. You can't look that way. You can't get to the real thing. You can only have the experience, as if you are looking at a flashlight, and by analyzing the light you can figure out what this torch is, right? You can only get the light from it, right? You can never get to the torch by analyzing the light. That's sort of an analogy, right?
It's another approach. So, you and I see different colors, everything could...
No, that's a comparison of two that's a comparison between those two or more subjective experiences that you need to compare to get to objectivity.
Could be an illusion, man, we are the dream of the dolphin or whatever. All of those would be relativistic or subjectivist views, that everything occurs within the mind, and then the mind is not subjected to external empirical reality.
I think you are conflating things here, right? It is a difficult, if you don't get idealism, which is, in my opinion, the only right way to see metaphysics. And if he's a good philosopher, he will point out during his presentation of this metaphysics that there is the problem of the hard problem of consciousness, and there is the problem of other minds, right? That he should point out, because no matter how much physics and science and whatever you do to figure out what it's like to eat the taste of a strawberry or the smell of a rose, you cannot get from atoms and material energy and Newton's laws or Einstein, whatever. From that, you can't get causality from that to the smell of roses. You only have correlations, right? You have some, there's something called the easy problem of consciousness, which is those areas of the mind react when you smell a rose or something like that, right? So there's a correlation between, but when you're seeing something on a computer screen lighting up in somebody's brain, then you're using your eyes. But the smell of the roses is the smell of roses. It is a completely different sense data, right? And it's in your mind. The smell of roses is in your mind. You may feel it like it's in your nose, but your nose is also a part of your mind, right? It's a mental representation of your body, not the real body, but the mental representation in your mind of it, right? So everything is in your mind from the start, right? Or at all times. But when you get to objectivity, that is when you start to try to agree with other individuals about that external reality that you both have a subjective experience of. And that is why exactly it's so important with this objectivity if you need to work together with other people.
So if we bring back our fancy schmancy overlapping balls here, we have material reality and we have the mind. And in the rationalist, or at least in my approach, we have truth, objective empirical truth, as the meeting of those two things.
Fast forward a bit here.
How does religion cock up this these balls, so to speak? Well, there is a concept within our mind called gods, elves, demons.
I might add that in the 40 pages or so, I deconstructed before I had to give up, because the rest of it was sort of, repeating the same thing over again. The last 60 or 70 pages is that the title of the book, or the subtitle, is A Secular Ethics. But in those first 40 pages, where he sort of tries to establish a proof, right? And he fails miserably. But there's this secularity, which is another way of saying that the ethics has nothing to do with what people are thinking in the churches, right? But there is not a single word about secularism in that proof. Nothing, not a single word of religion or churches or Christianity or Buddha or nothing, not even a single reference. And if there is one, they're so well hidden that I have forgotten all about it, right? So maybe he is, doing that service here by, bringing up religion because he forgot to do it in his proof.
Hobbits and so on, but it extends these concepts of gods into some kind of super reality. And also these people who say, well, there is an alternate reality where God could exist. There's some super reality that exists. There is a hostility towards psychology. Again, not to pump the free books, but How Not to Achieve Freedom talks about this and why. There, of course, is an acceptance of material miracles, because the mind, in a very similar way to subjectivism, is larger than reality, whether it's God's mind or your mind in communion with God or whatever. But physical laws and properties can be willed into alternate states or things which would be impossible in the normal course of things.
I must admit that
faith, belief
that
equals truth. What exists
religion is not my strong
truth.
sides at all. I am I'm a philosopher, so I don't deal in religion because it's BS, right? So I'll try to get a little further here. You can check it out yourself. So I won't comment on it because it's not my field of expertise or whatever. Expertise, right? Yeah, you know what I mean. God, determinism. Okay, let's see about free will.
Machine, it doesn't create, it doesn't will in that way. Free will is a magical illusion. It's a ghost in the machine. It's an elf at the driving wheel and is not real. And because free will is an illusion and choice is an illusion, there's no such thing as preferred states, right? If two rocks are bouncing down a hill, there's not one place which is preferred for one of them to land and not preferred for another one to land. There's no race that one should win and shouldn't win. It's simply the unfolding of material processes.
I would say that I think determinism, the idea of determinism and the rejection of free will, is a consequence of bad metaphysics. If you have a dualist or materialist worldview, it's not possible to get to what's going on in the mind. And then it just, well, then if I can't overcome the hard problem of consciousness or, the problem of other minds, I'm just going to say, well, there's no free will. So that's the kind of rejection a lot of people in what is typically called scientism, I think, that everything should be science and nothing is left to the human mind. There are even people, or philosophers even, that reject that there's something such as consciousness or, mental experience. I mean, that it is ridiculous, right? That's all you have, really, right? Because that material world that people are referring to is actually also a part of the mind, right? It's not the thing that is outside the mind. It can't be, because it must be inside the mind, right? So I would say that I'm working from the idea that the whole experience is an expression of free will, right? It must, if there's an outside, which I'm pretty convinced about, that's the axiom I'm working from. I just don't have access to it. But if you're saying that your scientific approach of determinism, then you're actually saying that you know what is going on outside in that realm, the noumena, as Kant would call it, but you don't. You only have access to your mental structure, right? So the mental structure is that which has appeared to handle that outside world you don't have access to. And why would it appear unless you needed it to handle that outside world? So it feels like it's a complete, in itself, an expression of free will. That's the sort of idea I'm working from. So determinism is complete ridiculous, right? So
no choice. And we don't argue with raindrops that are going down a window. You know, you see them say, oh, go left, go right. No, that's bad, that's wrong. So there's no preferred states in the deterministic universe. This also includes compatibilism.
I believe that me and Stefan Molyneux are very much on the same page when it comes to free will versus determinism. And the funny thing with determinists is, as Stefan Molyneux also have correctly pointed out, in my opinion, is that they seem to have free will. I mean, everything they do is, you know, an expression of free will. When you call them and say, would you want to come on a show? Yes, we are planning in the future. And a guy like Sam Harris says, oh no, free will is an illusion, right? And then he says, in the future, if something bad happened, someone from the state should come and, you know, do something to people, because we can't have people running around killing and all that, right? And then he's actually saying that somebody should do something particular in the future, which means that they should be at a certain place and a certain time in the future, which is the same as saying they have free will. I mean, the guy is freaking crazy, right? So all these determinists, they behave as all there is free will, right? So I don't buy any of that determinism. I'm a complete free will guy.
And of course, since truth is a preferred state, there's no such thing as preferred states. There's no such thing as truth. So determinism, let's get our balls up here again. Determinism, we've got material reality, we've got the mind, we've got the truth, which is the meeting of the two. And what determinism does, though, is it takes the mind out of material reality and puts the mind into material reality. So it is subject to all of the exact same physical laws as every other piece of atomic matter or any other.
I think you made a mistake there. You need to put truth into the mind also, don't you? I'm not somebody. What would truth be if it was outside the mind? Even if you have a complete materialist and had the problem of other minds, I think they would say that truth is a part of your mental construct. But I'm no expert on this weird, crazy idea. So, okay.
Physical property or physical law in the universe, and therefore there is no such thing as free will. Moral.
Fast forwarding a bit here.
Philosophy, at least the way that I work with it, gets it right. So we have material reality.
Sorry,
we have the mind.
Sorry, no, you don't get it right, because it must be an idealist approach. It has to be, because you can't access what is outside your mind. If you say there's something outside your mind, you can't know what that is, right? It makes no sense to say that a part of you has access to something that isn't mind. If it isn't mind, how could you possibly experience it, right? So the only way to combine this is to say, well, everything I experience is in my mind. And if there's something outside myself, I don't have access to that. I have only access to a representation my mind creates to get around in that which it can't experience, right?
We have truth, and the purpose of science, for instance, is to stretch this ellipsis of truth to further encompass, to bring the mind closer into material reality without, co-joining the two. Truth gets stretched out into material reality, and psychology does the same thing for our inner lives, for our inner states, so that we gain greater self-knowledge of our emotions, our core beliefs, our motivations, the value of our dreams, if we can figure them out, and so on. So we're designed to stretch this, and this is the increase in human knowledge into the material and into the self. Generally, I would say start with the left, go to the right. This is Aristotle and Socrates, first thing, the beginning of wisdom is self-knowledge. So this is how philosophy, rational philosophy, and the approach that I take.
Well, then I'm not a rational philosopher. That's for sure. Rationality is not something you are handed down from somewhere, right? Rationality is what you subjectively determine as worth spending your reasoning time and skills on, right? So that material that you have sort of a representation of, you start to figure out, okay, I'm thinking this is going to stay here for another 10 years, and this is going to change, and that the bottle of milk is going to go bad in a few days, and so on. That's the kind of rationalization you do to further your survival, to be quite simplistic, right? So, or further the quality of your survival, right? So this duality stuff, it can't be true, right? Because you only have your mind experience. You can't say there's something outside you can say there's as I do, there's something outside, but you don't have access to it. So you can't say that is material. You can only say that what is in your mind is material, right? That those experiences are what you refer to when you say material. You are sort of pushing that experience outside yourself because that's what it feels like. It feels like you are present in it. But everything you experience is sort of a 3D virtual reality inside your brain, and you're wandering around sort of metaphysically blindfolded. But everything is coordinated in your mind so that every sense data fits together. And when I, if I, move my hand here, I can predict that I will have the sensation of touching my laptop, and that's what I experienced. So if everything is coordinated, it seems very, very likely that there's something outside yourself. But I would say it is nothing like what you experience. It is completely different. This is the only thing I would say about it, because what you have is a representation that works towards your survival, not towards your understanding it, right? No, it doesn't work towards an understanding of it, and it's only a representation. So it's a double whammy of difference, right?
And Freedomain Radio gets it right, of course. And so UPB, again, is all of the states where there is objectivity, where there is truth, where people are saying things that are supposed to be valid about material reality and its principles and its properties, and that which is objective. So let's take a quick step through examples.
Agree with that,
again,
I think.
We could go on and on with
I'm
this.
a little surprised about that.
Briefly. So in the mind, you have an experience. Oh, I dreamed about an elephant. The truth claim you could make is my dream elephant exists.
No, don't go into dreams. Come on. Everybody knows that this dream is a dream. I mean, yeah, you could go into it, but take real life examples that we deal with, right? We don't go around, moralizing about dreams. We moralize or whether or not some guy in a blue costume can stick a gun to my face, right?
In reality, the reality is that dream elephants do not exist in reality, but only within your own mind. Now you touch an elephant.
I'll take these one at a time, and let's decide for them. Wait, let me see. Here, I dreamed about an elephant. So you're not dreaming about the elephant. So what you have now is a memory of a memory of a dream of an elephant. So a memory can't, because it's a memory, it is something that has to do with the past. So you can't make a truth. You can claim a truth, but it should be rejected as an incorrect proposition, because proposition deals with what is present, what is real. Only things that can be, in my opinion, referred to as a concept, like elephant, can be claimed as true. The impression of the elephant, not the idea of the elephant of which you were dreaming, right? So it's both the idea of the elephant and it's a memory of a dream of an elephant. So there's nothing that can be at all true about that. You can see I have that memory. Fine, you have that memory, but nobody else can access that memory. And since it wasn't a real elephant after all, I mean, why would you bother? So truth claims doesn't apply here. Reality, there's no reality about a dream. Dream elephants do not exist in reality. Fine, that's correct, right? Elephants feel warm to touch. Mind, truth claim elephants are warm-blooded. And it's, no, warm-blooded is a category, and it's an artificial category, right? If it was a truth claim, now what you should state was not truth claim. What you possibly mean is a proposition, right? Whether or not it's true is up to whether or not you experience that which the proposition states. Elephants feel warm to touch. Well, how many elephants are you feeling? Are you talking about all elephants? But because then what you are referring to is incorrect, because you're not feeling every single elephant in the world. How would you possibly know if that was the case? You can say this elephant feels warm, right? If you say that, or you don't even have to say it, your mind just experiences it. I must point that out. If it's a truth claim / proposition, that would be that elephant feels warm, right? Reality is the same. I mean, reality is the warm feel of the elephants. There's nothing, elephants are warm-blooded. No, that's a theory. That's not reality. No, you are mixing things now, right? I see red. I am looking at red. Oh, mind just says red, right? That's what mind does. The proposition is, well, I would say you can't make propositions about red. Red is a subjective, or it is subjective, of course, but it's a matter of degree. It's a matter of degree. If the lights dim, it may change. If there's a green light shining on that redness, it might change into brown or something. So it's a matter of degree. So in my opinion, it can't be proposed. It can't be proposed, but it can't have a truth because it's incorrect proposition. So I would say it can't be proposed. Reality is just red. No, I see the light wavelength. No. A wavelength is not red. A wavelength is your mental interpretation of that single signal that eventually correlates with redness in your mind. You only experience the redness. The wavelength is not red. That is not reality. You don't know what is in reality, right? The wavelength is still only also your mind's representation of what might go on in that outside world of which you do not have access. Okay, I won't go into that God thing. What's that down here?
4 equals 5. And you say, oh, 2 plus 2 is 5. And then the reality is you put, I don't know, 2 rocks.
4 equals 5 in the mind. Why would that be in the mind? I don't understand. Nobody's trying to trick themselves. I don't believe that. Nobody says in this, they might express it 4 equals 5 to confuse other people, right? But they don't think that. I don't believe people think that. They can try to force themselves to imagine 4 equals 5, but they don't have that belief about 4 equals 5. Right? I don't believe that. So I won't go into that mathematics. Numbers are, mathematics. It's purely artificial, right? There's no reality of 2 plus 2 equals 4. That's reality is not mathematics. Mathematics is purely in your mind. It doesn't have an objectivity. It's a construct. It's a convention of how to count and manipulate those numbers you count with and so on, right? 2 plus 2 is a convention. There's no 2 and 2 and 2 out in the world, and no 4. There's nothing there. It's all sort of mental manipulations, right? So it has nothing to do with reality as such.
Rocks and two rocks together, you count them, you find that there are four rocks. And so again, you're going through this good friend, our philosophical guinea pig, Bob, and we are in a debate where we are correcting Bob about something. Well, the moment that you tell...
But why would you call it correcting? Who are you? What kind of what kind of, what's the word, authority do you have to correct people? You can't tell them what they experience. Only they know what they experience. You have no access to that. Create the problem of other minds. So if somebody is saying that's a cow, and you're not experiencing a cow, or you experience a cow and somebody else says that proposition is false, you can't go and tell them they should experience that which you think they should experience. You have no access to that. You are sort of this. You are so hooked up on a point. I experience cow, so you must be experiencing cow. If you say something else than that, there's something wrong with you. You are subjective. You are a communist. You are an egg lord. You all sorts of stuff, right? Because you think you have access to that external, objective world. It's a fallacy. It's a misconception of how things work in your mind. You need to let that go, because otherwise you think that everybody is trying to fool you, right? Maybe they are, but you think that everybody who thinks differently than you are out to get you. No, they might have another subjective experience of that which you also have an experience of, right? And if they're so far from your experience, or the proposition you make, or you have a very hard time establishing some kind of objectivity, I would say, well, let's part ways then. I'm moving this way while you're moving that other way, and bye-bye. Let's not, inflict each other's subjectivity on each other anymore.
Tell Bob that he is wrong. You're saying that ideas within his mind, ideas within your mind, Bob, do not conform to objective reality or are illogical and thus cannot be true. Cannot be true, because truth is the relationship between thoughts and either objective reality itself or the principles we derive from it, the laws of non-contradiction and the logical laws and so on.
I wholeheartedly disagree about your understanding of this and truth and so on, and illogicality and conformance to objective reality. So this is completely wrong. It's completely wrong, incorrect. Let me say that, right? So, and I would advise you to go and listen to my deconstruction of UPB, where I go over this many times. And if you listen to what I previously said in this video, you would see why this is. Understand why this is wrong, right? So let's head on further.
Of propositions called truth, proof, evidence, rationality, these kinds of things, science. So truth requires at least logical consistency and or empirical evidence. Truth is universally preferable to falsehood, right? So if I say Bob says 2 + 2 is 5, and I say no, 2 + 2 is 4, I'm not expressing an opinion. I'm attempting to align his truth statement to that which is real, that which is
true. That is freaking dangerous, right? That is dangerous. You think that you must change people's mind of what they should experience. No, my mate. You do not want to do that. You do not want to state things like that. You want to change people's minds so they are the right thinking. You're sort of a religious missionary man going out to tell people, oh, this is what you should experience. There's something wrong with you. Can't you see that's a cow? I mean, I don't want to sound like Arnold Schwarzenegger, but that's a cow. But truth is universally preferable to falsehood. No, this is just a regurgitation of what is in my in UPB in the first case, and you will find, like my deconstructions of these kinds of statements. So I'm trying to look for something new here.
That which is objective, that which is rational. So universally preferable behavior, UPB. There's no possibility that you can go up to someone and say, there is no such thing as...
I might point out, he writes that UPB equals reason, science, and evidence. Well, ethics, ethical framework, as he calls UPB, it's not really a moral principle. It doesn't equal science. And for one very major reason, his proof is based on a deductive syllogism, right? It's based on syllogisms, which are deductive reasoning, while science and reason and evidence, which is a part of science and knowledge, is specifically inductive reasoning. So how do you combine these two in this way? It's beyond my wildest fantasies of what is possible in philosophy, right? You can't do that. It's ridiculous.
Is universally preferable behavior because UPB...
And then it comes, if you say there's no such thing as UPB, you are contradicting yourself. Or what it eventually turns out to be, that the argument that he has made that UPB is correct, if you argue against it, you are proving that UPB is correct. Now, you can go into the deeper dives into that syllogism, which I spent, I think it's part 11, where I go deep into the syllogism, and I really encourage you to see that in order to understand why this is so out of the, it's it's on the dark side of the moon, let me say it that way.
Is implicit in correcting someone with regards to objective truth. What you're basically saying is it is universally preferable for you to correct your false opinion that anything is universally preferable. You see, it is a complete contradiction, you moral whatever.
No.
Well, of course, someone's going to say, but it might be perfectly wrong.
Well, murder is wrong. Murder is an immoral way of killing, or a wrong way of killing. How else could you understand what murder is? It's a killing, and murder is, it shouldn't occur, so it's wrong, right? So what you're saying, murder is wrong, you're saying a wrong killing is wrong. You're just pointing at that wrongness and saying that is wrongness. What you're not doing is explaining what that wrongness is. Because, and why I keep saying this is that is what you need to point out in your framework, right? Otherwise, you're jumping over Hume's is-ought gap, like there's no tomorrow, right? But you can't do that without explaining what that immorality is, or you are violating Hume's is-ought gap, which was your first ground rule in your ethics. So please, all right? Okay, let's see if there's more goodies. Judging moral theories. Yeah, that's also a big weakness on his UPB, is that he doesn't go all the way. He makes a framework for judging moral theories, but he goes sort of 90% towards the goal and say, well, you do the rest, right? And another thing that occurred to me is that if you don't go all the way, you don't present a moral principle, because that is hardcore. That is freaking hardcore to say, this is the moral principle I urge everybody in the world to follow. He doesn't have the balls to do that. So he stops 90% in front of the goal and says, you figure out a moral principle and then run it through my UPB. And he will also himself be able to grab whatever moral principle he likes already and run it through UPB. And if he has already sort of condensed or conditioned his moral principle to go connecting the dots in that direction, well, that moral principle he already had before he started to write his book or create his ethics will run through like no problem, right? So all he's doing is just saying, well, I have the principle already and it's okay. It checks out, right? But there's a big problem also is that if everybody has to figure out a principle, nothing says that his principle is right. I make my own. I make 3 or 4 principles that I'm going to work with. And everybody in the world can do that. So we could have like 20 billion different moral principles, right? Why would you want that? Why would you want that? The only real right thing to do is to go all the way. Ethics needs to be condensed into a moral principle that is simple and easy to understand and makes sense and all this. And that fits into a human being's way of living. You shouldn't adjust it so that it's easy to use just because of that reason. But you shouldn't make it more complicated than it needs to be, right? So.
And determinism and relativism and other superstitions have just messed it all up.
Always remember the scientific. I can't run a moral principle through the scientific method. What the hell are you saying? You proved your framework using deductive syllogism. And then you're saying, I'm going to use an inductive reasoning. I mean, are you mad or something?
Right, and clouded it. So when you get confused, when you get lost, it happens to me too. Just go back to the scientific method, which is a great bookmark for helping to keep you on track with UPB. So when someone says a murder is unscientific, if propositions, human habits, everybody seems to dislike murder. It's not a biological drive, like how to specific actions, only theories. Moral theories are judged by UPB, evaluated by UPB, not individual actions. So just keep remembering that, because that's where I see people take the greatest.
No, but that's also one of the huge critiques I have. A big problem is it doesn't refer to any, you can't use it on any specific action. It doesn't have to mention a specific action, right? But it has to somehow refer to actions and not behaviors. Because as I argue in my deconstruction is that behaviors are certain categories. It is a categorization of actions that have the same purpose, like eating, right? Or sleeping. It's an action that has a certain purpose, and these are lumped together into behaviors. That's the way I see it, at least, right? So a behavior is not something that is going on in the world. Neither is preferability and universality. So your framework doesn't refer to anything in the world I live in, right? So I can't use it for anything.
Wrong turns. Morality is not a cultural custom, a local opinion, an observation of human habits. Everybody seems to dislike murder. It's not a biological drive like altruism. It's not a practical and functional necessity for society. None of those things. Moral theories are universal, UPB compliant theories about preferred behavior. Morality is a theory or any theory that attempts to describe and define universally preferable behavior. This includes science, because science is around having integrity rather than going off into fantasy. Morality is judged, a moral theory is judged as true or false, first by internal consistency and then according to...
No, incorrect. Objectivity is reached by using true or false, right? That it has nothing to do with, you have to establish what is going on by establishing objective facts or objective knowledge before you can find out how you're going to act. But the act is about how things are performed between two or more individuals. If you're alone on an island, nobody would come and say you should act this or that way. Supply that is nobody's island, so to say, right? You're alone there. You're not pissing on anyone's ground or whatever, right? So there's no morality there. But as soon as somebody falls down, Tom Hanks and Tom Cruise lands and in his airplane there, and all of a sudden morality is an aspect they have to figure out. Can you just kill him? Should they fight over the food, or what should happen? Well, that's what morality tries to settle. And to settle that, they need to be agreeing on how that reality you refer to is composed. They need to have objectivity. Otherwise, at least about that which they disagree upon, or they want to establish a fair interaction with, right?
To the general evidence. Now, since I'm talking about interactions with reality, we can look at the effects of general theories on human behavior. So stealing simply cannot be universally preferable behavior. The respect for property rights, self-ownership is universally preferable behavior.
No, because stealing is defined as an immoral way of acquiring stuff. It's a wrong way or immoral way of interacting with objects, right? So it cannot be universally preferable behavior. No, because universally preferable behavior is about determining what is moral and what is not moral, right? So if you're saying that stealing is immoral, you are right, but you're still not pointing out what that immoral part is, and that is the job of the moral philosopher. They need to point out how you know that it's moral. That immoral part, you can't jump over a Hume scissor gap, as you yourself has said.
I go into the proof in the book. So stealing cannot be universally preferable behavior, and therefore we would expect systems that are founded upon violations of property rights and personhood to be failures, right? And so we look at communism, bad. Well, I don't know. I mean, is he getting his money back? Is
this a moral
theory? You say, okay, is this a moral theory or is this a moral statement? Right? A guy robs you in an alley. Is that good or bad? Well, I don't know. I mean, is he getting his money back? Is he? Who knows, right? So we're looking for universal general moral theories, right? Stabbing guys in alleys is universally preferable behavior. Well, that you can evaluate according to UPB. A guy stabs another guy in an alley, you can't evaluate. It's an individual instance. You can't have a theory about one thing. You can't have a universal theory about a rock. It has to be about matter or gravity or whatever. So, first thing, is this a moral theory that's being talked about or just some question about a specific action? Is it a moral theory? If it's not a moral theory, it's, who cares, right? So is this moral theory internally consistent and logical? Can it be practiced independent of time, persons, and geography? You can't have, murder is great in San Francisco, but totally evil in Baltimore and so on. And that would...
No, you should answer the question, is this a moral theory? How will I know if some kind of statement or wherever it is a moral theory? And how do I know it's compatible with running through UPB, right? How will I know? Can't you state that in a sort of some kind of fairly easy statement here? Maybe you do it later. Let's see.
Be like having a theory which says rocks fall down in San Francisco, but they fall up in Baltimore. I mean, it wouldn't make any sense, right? This is the universality requirement of any truth statement in a theory. Is it universally applicable? Well, if not, then it's just a local theory, right? Is it with...
But is it universally applicable? If I'm standing next to a cow and I want to eat it, what is universal about that situation? Does that cow have to be in the whole universe? Or should that cow be able to be anywhere in the universe? Or should I be able to eat it anywhere in the universe? Or what are you talking about, right? I can't stand there with that fucking cow, right? Is eating, because that's the behavior, right? You're not referring to any specific object. I need to be able to determine whether that action I'm proposing to do has some immoral content to it. You have to be able to give me a tool to point to that potential immorality.
Without unchosen positive obligations, right? So moral theories that rely on social contracts and cultural absolutes, family loyalties, patriotism, religious superstition, those preferable behavior. It is, again, available for free, freedomainradio.com.
A little disappointing. This particular, is this a moral theory? If so, is this moral theory internally? If so, but you are not answering the question, is this a moral theory? If so, is this moral theory? Well, it's like you're dodging the question by, throwing the words out, right? It would be nice to have some sort of, this is how you check whether or not what you propose is a moral theory. You do this, you do this, you do this, done, right? Please, why not? Okay, this is a 12-year-old video or something like, so it's not likely not going to happen. Okay, that was all I had for today. This is Ethics Reloaded, deconstructed by Manny Beal. See you next time.